when it gets really muddy, the fish tend to go shallow. That's just what a big portion of the fish in the lake will go up shallow and be more susceptible to catching. You catch them power fishing on, you know, big line, big rods. It's just a lot of fun usually. But the key is fresh muddy water is never good. Pretty much any lake, when it first gets muddy, it's just not good. It usually takes it, you know, 3 or 4 days to kind of settle out and the fishing to get good. Like we're out here now and it's muddy. It's been muddy for almost 8 or 9 days now though. So the fish are getting accustomed to it and they're getting up shallow like that right there. It's a largemouth. But so there's certain baits that I just love for muddy water fishing, and that right there is one of them. This is just a 3/8 ounce chatterbait. This is chartreuse and white, or sometimes I just use plain white. But when I'm fishing shallow, a lot of times I'll put like a minnow style trailer on my chatterbait, but when I'm fishing shallow like this in this dirty water, I prefer a crawl style. This is a Z-Crawl Junior that I use for a jig trailer a lot, but it works really good for a chatterbait because it makes it stay plain well up shallow. And that fish right there was in maybe a foot of water on the walkway of this dock. And that is one thing that you really want to pay attention to when you're fishing dirty water is a lot of the fish are shallow, but they can't see very well. So you really have to kind of pick apart the cover you think the fish are on. Like docks right here, what I'm targeting today. And the docks, rather than just like when I would throw in normal, you know, normal color water or throw in a jig or something, I would kind of just work around the dock and make a cast on, you know, maybe the front, maybe the walkway. When you're throwing like a chatterbait or a spinnerbait around these docks in this dirty water, you actually have to make a cast to like every pole. And I'll actually loop around the dock so I can get angles on the poles like this. And I can reel my chatterbait parallel to every single pole in the dock. Because a lot of times you have to come right by these fish for them to see it. They're very willing to bite, but you have to get close enough to catch them. That might be a good one. Another largemouth. So I became very fond of throwing a chatterbait in dirty water around docks and laydowns and wood and things like that. But what I didn't realize until not long ago actually was I always threw a chatterbait in grass and things like that. And I didn't realize how successful you could be with them around wood because I always got hung. Around the wood, it seemed like every time I got where I thought I might catch a fish, I got hung. But I've learned when you're throwing this 3/8 ounce chatterbait, especially with this crawl trailer to make it plain flat, is if you reel it really, really slowly when you come over something, it generally will come over it. If you're reeling it fast, it wants to roll and get hung every time. But when you reel it really slowly over cross beams, over laydowns, over any type of wood cover like that, it generally will come right through. And a spinnerbait's a good option sometime, and I do always have a spinnerbait tied on in muddy water. But a chatterbait, to me, a lot of times I get more bites. It kind of depends on how I think the fish are sitting. If I think the fish are down maybe a little in the water column, I like this chatterbait. And if I think the fish are sitting up high and feeding, I like to reel the spinnerbait by the poles and wood. And the spinnerbait will catch the fish. They're sitting up a little bit higher versus this chatterbait. Your main thing you have to always remember is the fish can't see as well. So you really have to either present that bait multiple times, present it to every inch. And the other thing is too, that's good about muddy water is you're actually able to get your boat a lot closer than you could say if it was clear. So the boat positioning, make sure you get your boat to where you can effectively get, if you're using a moving bait such as a chatterbait or a spinnerbait, you can get it by every pole on the dock. Got that one. Nice spot. But that's multiple casts to one spot to get that fish to bite. That's a pretty good spot there. I made a bunch of casts to get that fish to bite to the same poles because they can't see it very well. A lot of fish, especially in the fall. In other times of the year, spring sometimes too, but especially in the fall and spring, in this dirty water, the fish tend to suspend on these pieces of wood, whether it's just laydowns, natural wood, or docks, or whatever cover you're fishing. The fish tend to suspend on the poles, and I throw a jig a lot, but sometimes a moving bait is way more effective than a jig because you can actually reel it kind of horizontally past the poles rather than letting it fall by them. Whenever you're reeling your chatterbait, spinnerbait along, whatever it is, when you come by a piece of cover that you think looks likely, I always do, whether it's chatterbait or spinnerbait, I always do a little fluttering action. Right when it comes by, a lot of times I'll get a bite that they may wouldn't have bit it if you didn't do that. So you want to pay attention where your bait is and always do something a little erratic when it comes by. I do the same thing with the buzz bait and all those, any type of moving bait. Notice we just had some big hurricanes around here and the water is really, really dirty. In my opinion, that's when a jig really, really shines, is when you get this dirty water. Throwing a black and blue one right now, actually, I really have 3 colors jigs I use. And that is a black and blue for really dirty water like this, a kind of black, brown, and amber, which is also a good dirty water color, but works in clear too, and then a green pumpkin jig. It's really the only 3 colored jigs that I carry around in those 2 sizes I mentioned earlier. And you kind of want to match your trailer. You don't want it to look too clashy, like you don't want to put a white trailer on the green jig or something like that. I mean, there might be weird situations, but really when you put your Z-Crawl Junior or whatever trailer, Speed Crawl, whatever trailer you're using, you want to match your trailer to that jig. But it's an awesome bait because when I'm fishing it, like I can get between docks like this, I actually catch a lot of fish on a jig just swimming it down the bank. Just like, I call this Carolina style, where you, not Florida where you just reel it, but kind of hopping it, swimming it down the bank. It's a good open water bait between docks, whereas when you're throwing like a creature bait or Texas rig, something like that, you know, you can't quite, it's not as good in that open water situation, but this will catch a lot of fish swimming it because it imitates a lot of different things, crawfish, bluegills, things like that. I don't think he's as good as I thought, but he's pretty good. Oh, pretty big spot. He's hung in that boat lift. It's a green pumpkin jig. Fish was right in that boat lift. This dirty water's got these bigger spots up here shallow. Skipping docks like this with a jig, what's easy to do is get too close. So me personally, I mean, I'm not gonna say everybody's the same, but when I'm skipping docks, I think it's much easier to actually be farther from the dock. Like, I don't get near as close as I do doing some other things, but skipping with a jig, I can skip this pretty well, like way out there. Now, I'm not gonna say as far as you can cast, but close. And in my opinion, yeah, it's not that finessey getting under there. It's, you know, bounces, splashes, things like that. But in my opinion, you're better off with the boat farther away. The splashing of the jig's not gonna scare the fish as much as the boat would. So I prefer to stay pretty far from docks when I'm fishing them, especially with a jig. With some baits, they're hard to skip. You have to be closer. But with the jig, it really skips pretty well, so you can stay a lot farther than you would with other baits. Long range. Look at that. Snuck it right there between the jet ski. I should have got a bite for that cast, but I didn't. Oh, I did. Oh, I didn't. Yeah, I did. He bit it halfway back. And he's tiny, but I snuck it in there. Another bait that I have a lot of confidence in him is muddy water. It's just like a little Squarebill crankbait. This is it's a little chartreuse and black Yozuri Squarebill's type bait. And when it gets really dirty like this, when it's cold, you kind of crank down the bank, you know, like normal winter fishing. But it's not really that cold yet. So the fish aren't really on like rock and points and things that great yet. But I really like to take a Squarebill and actually fish it just like I am the spinnerbait and chatterbait and jig. When you get around like shallow wood things, really pick it apart and reel it right by the specific cover that you want to hit. It's really challenging. I use my Century rod, my little small jerkbait rod, but that was a bad cast. But you need a really small rod so you can roll cast this bait under and tight around cover. And I actually treat it almost like a pitching presentation. I'm just throwing it right tight to the cover, reeling it right by specific spots that I think a fish might be. A lot of times the spinnerbait, chatterbait, they generally work, and that's probably what I lead with as far as it goes moving baits. But sometimes you can get a few bites on like a little finesse cranking presentation coming right by shallow cover in this dirty, dirty water that you won't get on the spinnerbait or chatterbait. Muddy water fishing is one of my favorite things to do because I love to fish shallow, and a lot of times in the clear water situations, shallow can just be kind of challenging in clear water. But when it gets dirty, a lot of fish go shallow and they tend to bite because they can't see your bait well, they can't see the boat well, and when it comes by, they're going to eat it. So my favorite baits for fishing dirty water is really 4 key baits. I throw a buzz bait a lot, everybody knows that, but I'm not even gonna mention the buzz bait in these baits because I've done plenty of videos on a buzz bait. Everybody knows I throw a buzz bait all the time. But the baits I throw is kind of a chatterbait and a spinnerbait. This is my moving kind of shad reaction baits. And I wish I could say I throw one in this situation, one in this situation, but really it's just 2 baits that I keep tied on in dirty water and keep honest. I will throw one a little bit, throw the other one a little bit, whichever one it seems like they like better that day, that's the one I throw more. Spinnerbait in the fall, like we're talking now, I generally go just a 3/8 or 1/2 ounce double willow, just pretty basic white, and it's just kind of something to cover water with, imitates the shad real well, and it gets bit a lot of times, like I mentioned earlier, it seems to work better when the fish are up higher. Like I like to reel my spinnerbait where I can almost see them swirl on it, maybe not see the bait because it's dirty water, but you see the fish swirl on it. Other times of year I throw a lot of different spinnerbaits, but we're talking the fall here, and this is just a small double willow, and it's a pretty simple setup. I just use 16 to 20 pound test, and rods vary. With a 3/8 I use my 1 more rod, but when I get to that heavier half, or sometimes I even throw a 3/4 if I'm wanting to reel it a lot faster, I'll use my buzz burner rod. Buzz burner is kind of hard to throw a 3/8 on because it doesn't have as much tip, but the 1 more for smaller ones and buzz burner for heavier spinnerbaits. Chatterbait, when I'm fishing shallow, when I'm fishing open water in grass and things, I throw a chatterbait on my Good Vibes, my fiberglass, my composite rod. But when I'm throwing around shallow cover like I was doing today, fishing around wood, docks, laydowns, things like that, I prefer the buzz burner rod because I'm a little more precise with it. Yes, you might lose a fish here and there because it's a little too stiff, but you can present the bait a lot more effectively and get more bites. Just a typical, this is a 3/8 chatterbait. I have 3/8 and 1/2. But the key, I think, when you're fishing shallow water is you want to use a crawl style trailer. This is a Z-Crawl Junior. If I'm fishing out deeper open water, a lot of times I put a minnow trailer, but this allows you to skip the bait a little bit, and it kind of keeps the bait up higher in the water column without it just getting down on the bottom and dragging. Use the same as my spinnerbait, 16 to 20 pound test and a gravity reel. And jig fishing, you got to have a jig tied on if the water's dirty. This is a green pumpkin one. A lot of times if it's real dirty, I'll go to black and blue, but I'd put it on 20 pound test on a do-all rod, and that's just kind of the pitch. Sometimes on docks, they like the jig better, and then sometimes they like the moving baits better, but this is just kind of pitch anything you see that looks like a likely location for a fish in this dirty water. And the last bait that you always have to have tied on in dirty water is a Squarebill crankbait. It's a Yozuri 1.5 Squarebill. This is a bright, like a perch color, but chartreuse and black, or fire tiger, any type of bright chartreuse colors. Keep this tied on to throw around rock. And as I mentioned, when you get around docks and things, it's a really good bait kind of to throw just like you're throwing the spinnerbait and chatterbait. Make little roll cast, get under the dock and reel it right by poles. I'll alternate my rod if I'm doing it real tight cover and use either the Century or 1 more rod. But when I'm throwing it kind of down the bank, I prefer Good Vibes. This composite rod, a lot of people don't realize what you do with them, but they look really stiff, but they're not because they're part fiberglass, part graphite, and that allows the bait to load up real well. You will very rarely ever lose a fish on a treble hook bait on a composite rod. The problem is they're not as easy to cast because they load up a lot more than a graphite rod would, so it's hard to present to those tight areas sometime that you want to get the Squarebill in. But in open water on points, rock, stick with the Good Vibes rod. So those baits in dirty water that's kind of what I stick to. It simplifies your bait selection a lot when you're fishing muddy water. But I think the key you gotta keep in mind is the fish can't see real well. So you really gotta pick apart whatever cover you're fishing and come by. I move pretty quick, but I make sure I make a lot of casts to all the places I think a bass would be. But you know, when it comes to muddy water, it's not always good. If it's just rain, you get a heavy, heavy downpour, it's probably gonna be just really tough in general for a few days. And usually in that scenario, what I'll do is try to get to the clear section of the lake and fish until the mud stables out. And then once the mud gets more stable, you can go up into that mud and the fish will be biting. But it usually takes, you know, 2, 3, sometimes even 4 days for the fish to really get acclimated to it and start feeding again. It takes them a little while to get there, but once they get there, it can be some of the most fun fishing the whole year. Had a great day today in muddy water, and it's something I look forward to every time we get a heavy rain.